Hello, everybody. Happy spring. Happy gardening season. Welcome to Bedford 2030's Wildly Beautiful Gardens webinar. I'm Midge Iorio. I'm the program director for Bedford 2030, and I'm so delighted to welcome everyone tonight. I'm sure it's going to be a wildly inspiring and informative conversation. At Bedford 2030, our mission is to connect neighbors near and far with programs, expertise, and tools to improve health and wellness of their lives, of our community, and of our planet. And tonight we're going to discuss how to do that in our yards in a way that's beautiful with Bedford 2030's Rooted Solutions coaches. Over the past 2 years, our coaches have visited over 180 local yards and gardens to give free coaching sessions and advice and information. They are fantastic, so let's get started. I'm just kind of give you a little bit of the rundown for tonight. In a minute, each of our coaches are going to introduce themselves. Then we're going to have a 10 to 15-minute talk on wildly beautiful gardens. After that, we have a community member, Clare Aldrich, who's going to talk for a couple of minutes about her experiences with the Rooted Solutions program. And then we will have a big chunk of time, 30 or 40 minutes to do Q&A. I want to direct everybody to your bottom of your Zoom screen. I'm getting my words mixed. There is an app to type in questions. So along the way, as questions come up, please type them in and we will answer them. So without further ado, I'm going to just go in the order that I see you. Andrea, could you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Andrea Good. I've been a Rooted Solutions coach for about 3 years now, since the inception of the program. Have been able to get out and see just amazing properties throughout the Bedford area. I'm a certified ecological landscape designer. I'm a master woodland manager, and I am a national green infrastructure certified professional.
Thank you. Caroline?
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Caroline Saxton. I've also been with the Rooted Solutions program since the inception about 3 years ago. I'm a retired scientist turned advanced master gardener, and I have certificates from New York Botanical Gardens as an urban naturalist and a sustainable garden design person from New York Botanical Gardens. And I do ecological landscape consulting, and I'm delighted to be here. We're very excited about this webinar. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Oh, thank you. And Fiona?
Hi, Fiona Mitchell. I also have been with Rooted Solutions since its inception. I am co-founder of Healthy Yards and Leaves Alone, whose mission is very much aligned with Rooted Solutions. Basically, we try to help people move away from more earth-friendly practices.
Fantastic. And last but not least, Missy?
Hi. Okay, so I'm also one of the original. Um, I am a ecological landscape designer and horticulturalist. So I do a combination of stewardship of ecological landscapes as well as design. And I'm really looking forward to tonight and chatting with everybody. So I'm going to share my screen to start. So just bear with me and we will get started. So Liv, if you don't mind, I'll just cue you for the next slide, please. Okay, there we go. So the question is, or a question is, what is a wildly beautiful garden? And I really like this quote by Daryl Morrison. He is an iconic landscape architect, one of the first landscape architects to really think about ecology as part of landscaping. He's now 89 years old. He has influenced generations of practitioners. But what he says is wildly beautiful gardens or landscapes should be both all actually experientially rich, ecologically sound, of the place, and dynamic. And I want to bring your attention to of the place first. If you look at the picture on the house with the big lawn, that's a house that could very well be in Chappaqua. It could be in Connecticut. It could be in New Jersey. It could be in Chicago. The point is, It's just our suburban landscapes have been all traditionally landscaped in a way that makes them kind of almost a monoculture. They all look alike. So you don't even really know where you are when you stop and you look at this house. Um, Dynamic really speaks to how we should start to think about our gardens, our landscapes as living things that do change, and that we should start working with them, not against them. So we should start to steward our landscapes rather than kind of trying to keep them in some status quo. Oh, Liv, please, next slide. Thank you. So how can we do this? Well, one of the first things that we can do is to plant native plants. Native plants are basically the foundation, the ecological foundation of healthy ecosystems. They have co-evolved with our insects, our birds, other plants over millennia. So they form these very complex interdependent relationships. For example, 90% of our insects have co-evolved to be specialists on other plant species. So the classic example is the monarch butterfly. I think many of you know that monarch butterflies can only lay their eggs on milkweed for their caterpillars to survive and then pupate into butterflies. So that's one way to kind of start thinking about your landscape is start planting the plants that were here, have been here for many years. Oh, next slide, please. Thanks. Okay, so wildly gardens, native plants provide habitat. That's really key and core to one of the things that we can do really to create a healthier planet. One of the, we all need food, shelter, cover, and water. I think some of you are probably familiar, if you look at the chickadee with the caterpillar on its mouth, in its mouth rather, birds have really evolved to feed their young caterpillar. A friend of mine who's a birder basically said caterpillars are the mother's milk for birds. And Doug Ptolemy, who I imagine many of you have already heard of, did a study rather, where he tracked how many caterpillars it takes to fledge a clutch of chickadees. And it turns out it's 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars to fledge about 3 chickadees that weigh about less than a penny. So think about that. Mom and dad are constantly foraging, constantly foraging. They need that soft protein nutrition. 90% of our songbirds feed their young caterpillars and insects. So it's really important that we start to provide the plants that those caterpillars and insects need, again, because then it becomes bird food for our songbirds. And then I put the 3 C's in here because I think this is another consideration is if you start to take a bird's eye view of your yard, you can do Google Earth, you can drone it. But again, if you start to think of your yard from top down, you see your yard, you see your neighbor's yard, your neighbor's neighbor's yard. And when we start to think of our landscapes as connected, as opposed to our own individual parcels, that's when we can really start to build continuum. So for example, if you and your neighbor decide you're going to build a hedgerow in between your yards and your other neighbor does, these become corridors or stopping grounds for migrating birds or for insects. And as we start to build these, we start to, kind of create this quilt, this ecologically healthy quilt. We start to build community. Just like we're all here tonight, we want community. We want to put forward, we all care about our planet, making it healthier. So this is one of the ways we can start to build community is by providing this connectivity. Oh, next slide, please. Keep thinking. So lawns, as I showed in that second slide, the house on the left, which could be anywhere USA. Lawns are basically the single largest crop in the US, covering almost 40 million acres, which is basically the size of Wisconsin. It is the largest irrigated crop surpassing corn and wheat and soy. So just think about how much water that needs. In fact, it needs almost 18 trillion gallons of water a year, which is basically enough to fill the Chesapeake Bay. Another thing about our lawns and the way we've kind of developed them and treat them is that they need constant inputs. They're resource intensive. They need fertilizer really to remain healthy. Part of the reason is because they have very shallow roots. So once they start to grow their roots, we decide it's time to cut them. So we cut off the top, cut off their photosynthesizing. And again, we need to feed them because they're not able to do it on their own. What happens is when you have a lot of fertilizer on a lawn, when you have a storm event, there can be runoff into storm drains, streams, and rivers, and that can create really toxic conditions for both wildlife and for humans. But please, next slide. But you can turn your lawn into a wildly beautiful habitat. This is a client of mine. He had a lawn. When I first met, he had this lawn and he elected to just rip it out and start fresh. And so what we did was, after he ripped it out, we did the planting. And then the following year, if you can click, Liv, you'll see that was the result of that planting just 1 year later. And look at the abundance. That was teeming with life, butterflies, insects, pollinators, birds. So just by taking this small little patch of lawn, he really created a living habitat. Next slide, please. Thank you. So another consideration when we're thinking about our landscape is ecologically destructive species, or species that are not native to our area. These are species that came in through the horticultural trade, ornamentals, or accidentally. And the issue with them is that they actually cause ecological harm or even kill our native species. And when that happens is they're taking the space of other native plants that have co-evolved with our insects and our fauna and other flora for millennia. And what that does, it lessens the food, everything that the others that we need to have a healthy ecosystem. They can outcompete native species. I guess that's what I was just trying to say. They thrive on disturbance. They have no natural predators here, again, because they're not from our area. So they haven't developed those complex relationships. You can see in this image, this is a bittersweet vine that has really gouged this tree. And if you're driving along the sawmill, you have seen bittersweet and porcelain berry, I'm sure, growing all over our trees along the sawmill. That's not how it's supposed to look. Next slide, please. So we talked about plants. We talked about how native plants are really important, but of course the foundation of native plants is a healthy soil system, or are healthy soils. And healthy soil naturally sequesters carbon. Soil is teeming with life, with microbiota, fungi, bacteria, all of these kind of beneficial organisms working together to create this healthy soil for our native species to thrive. And to build or maintain one, some of the things you can do is avoid pesticides and herbicides. They're non-selective. They will basically kill all of the biota in your soil if you're using them. And leave the leaves. This is something I know Fiona will be able to talk more about, but leaves are our natural nutrients recycler. So as they break down, they add nutrients to the soil. In addition, they're really important because they harbor, or are habitat for our overwintering insect larvae rather, which then become bird food in the spring as those birds are starting to return, or if they've been here all winter, starting to nest and lay eggs, and then eventually feed their young, all of those caterpillars. One thing to note is that a lot of our plants that have co-evolved here prefer lean soil. So if you're starting to think about building a native plant garden or adding native plants to your landscape, I would recommend not adding compost. Basically, compost creates a richer soil. And so save that for your vegetable garden, because that's where you really need it for your vegetables to grow strong and healthy and to get that giant tomato or squash in the fall. Next slide, please. And then adopt climate-friendly practices. We've talked already about pesticide-free. One of the things you can do in your landscape, relatively simple, well, first going pesticide-free or herbicide-free, is also transitioning to electric equipment. There are a lot of leaf blower bans in many of our towns. There needs to be more to do that. So leaving the leaves in place, especially in your garden beds, is one thing you can do. Mulching your leaves if they're on your lawn breaks them up so they're not going to smother your lawn. And turn off the lights at night. Light pollution is becoming more and more of an issue. I remember when I was a little girl growing up in White Plains, I could go outside and see the Milky Way. I live now in northern Westchester, which is a lot less populated. I go outside, I can't make it out. So that's light pollution. And what happens is all of our excess light that's beaming into the sky attracts moths, attracts bats, who then just kind of become confused or circle in circle until they just get exhausted and then fall down or die. And as you're removing those ecologically destructive plants, use native species in their place. And next slide, please. Think. So some of the considerations when you're starting to garden, thinking about how you want to add native species to your yard, is to really know your site. So these are a lot of sort of traditional. You have to understand if you have wet, dry soil, average soil, your sun exposure, is it full sun, full shade, somewhere in between, topography. Go outside and observe your landscape, whether it's raining, snowing, sunny, shady, cloudy. Look at it at all times. Start to really get intimate with your landscape. And that is how you're going to really know what plants might be the right for your spot. Look at how the water flows on site. Is it running off into a nearby stream? Is it pooling in a flat area? Also, start to survey your site. There are so many plant ID apps now, plant ID apps out there. So you can start to kind of figure out what you already have on your site that is native. Then you can also sort of look at what invasive species you have and what you want to prioritize. And then lastly, I think maintenance and stewardship considerations are really important when you're starting to think about how you're going to add native plants and adopt some of these practices, because native plants it's often sold that native plants need less maintenance, and that's actually not true. They need different maintenance. So for example, they do need water to become established, their first year. If it's a shrub, maybe 2 years, but they don't need constant irrigation. They don't need fertilizer. They don't require a lot of the heavy pruning that you see happening all across the suburbs, and how much you want to be involved. The other thing I just like to end with, sort of end with, is I was at the Native Plant Center's annual conference last week, and Leslie Needham, a local landscape architect, ended one of her talks with this quote: "Native plants give your landscape a heartbeat." And I just think it really speaks to the truth of what we're trying to do. If you think back to the second slide where we had the picture of, suburban house anywhere USA, next to the picture with all this beautiful life, beautiful flowers, and beautiful gardens. If you can just think in your mind, like the anywhere USA kind of was sterile, is sterile, versus the other one where it's just full of life, and life that's going to not only create healthier ecosystems for our insects and our birds, but for us too. We're part of it. Next slide, please. And then here's a few resources. Bedford 2030 has a lot of resources on its website, as well as Healthy Yards. So we're sort of just listing a few. And then the next slide, please. So also just want to highlight some upcoming events. So Bedford 2030's Earth Day Festival is going to be Sunday, April 26th, again at Bedford Village Memorial Park. It's going to be awesome. Definitely go. And the day before is the Native Plant Center's annual plant sale. So if you're looking to start adding native plants to your garden, you already have native plants, you're looking for something unusual, definitely check it out. And then the other thing I want to mention is Bedford Audubon is doing a talk tomorrow night. I'm part of that talk about creating a bird-friendly lawn. So really talking sort of about the history of our lawns, how we can think about reducing them or think about them differently to support particularly birds. It is Bedford Audubon. But by supporting birds, you're also supporting other wildlife and the caterpillars in the ecosystem and the pollinators. And the next slide shows Doug Talamay, who I referenced. On the bottom, you can see these are his books, and these are some other organizations really dedicated to creating wildly beautiful gardens and working with nature, not against it. So what can you do? Well, you can meet with a Rooted Solutions coach. Here's a QR code. Of course, there's information on the website, and we'd love to come out to your site. We'd love to meet you. We'd love to talk to you, whether you're just starting out or you've been at this for a while. We're always happy to talk healthy landscapes and healthy ecosystems and plants, for me particularly. So thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to our conversation.
Thank you so much, Missy, and for to every all the coaches helped with their expertise, and that was just wonderful. So I'm now going to turn it over to Claire, if you're ready, Claire, to um, unmute and show yourself. And thank you in advance for sharing a little bit about your experience with the coaching program.
Sure. You can hear me, right?
Yes, hear you and
Okay,
see
good.
you.
Well, hello, everybody. My name's Claire, and thank you to the panel for inviting me to speak tonight about my experience. I'm Claire. I live in Lewisboro, so if there are any fellow Lewisboroians who want to reach out a network, I would love that. So for the first 20 years that I lived here, I was a commuting parent, and I had no idea what was going on my property. And I inherited whatever landscape had been there, which was mainly deer resistant, but heavily non-native and kind of boring, you know. So then COVID hit and working from home and retirement, and I started taking my daily walks up the street. And there I noticed a neighbor had a mailbox garden with a pollinator sign. And I've always been a big fan of the environment, and I immediately caught into it. And Emily told me what she was up to with the pollinator pathway, and I got started. She actually was involved with the Boy Scout troop. I bought a few swamp milkweeds, and then next thing, I forget exactly how I got onto the list for Bedford 2030, but the Rooted Solutions opportunity came along. I jumped on it. Fiona was sent to me, and she was amazing. I mean, the secret is Fiona could read me the telephone book and I would listen, but it was such an eye opener. And she meets you where you are. She knows everything there is about, you know, the soil and what plant would work here and the drainage. And one of my favorite moments was she just casually said, "Oh yes, mossy phlox over here." And of course, I had no idea what mossy phlox was, but I'm totally in love with it now. And it's just so wonderful to have a yard where things are beautiful and blooming, and then you know that you're helping so many of our endangered species. So I now have about 10 garden beds. I still have a lawn, I confess, but I'm transitioning, and I'm a big fan of mulch mowing, which is another thing that Fiona told me about because I really want to get away from gas blowing. And so, just a thought, the more that you move towards mulch mowing, ideally, the more you can move away from blowing altogether because it is very hard on the topsoil. But anyway, so I'm a huge fan of the program. I mean, Rooted Solutions could not make it any easier. It's really it's a brainchild. It's a brilliant program, and I encourage everybody to take advantage of it. So thank you and good luck.
Thank you so much, Claire. So I want to remind everybody that I want to tell you the chat is disabled on this Zoom, but if you look at the bottom of your Zoom, there's the little bubble with a question and a Q&A. I see a couple of people have added some questions there, and we invite you to add them. I'm gonna start with a question actually that somebody tried to type in but texted me that they couldn't because they're from Bedford 2030, so they're not allowed. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But I'm going to start and actually going to give this one to you, Caroline. Lillian is asking about what's the difference between when something is organic and something is natural? Is it one and the same? How do we, how should we think about that?
It's a great question, and it comes up a lot when I go on some of my visits with clients. Um, it's kind of many companies like to lull you into a false sense of security by telling you that something is organic and natural. And I just say to people, buyer beware, right? So, chemically, from a chemical perspective, the word organic is defined as a compound with a carbon background. So a carbon backbone, and then everything is covalently bonded on there. So, for example, proteins and carbohydrates, lipids and nucleic acids are all organic compounds. So is methane and propane. So are alcohols and solvents. So is glucose and fructose, and so is formaldehyde. And petroleum is actually an organic compound. So you wouldn't want to put petroleum on your garden, especially not at today's prices. Um, so, just be aware when you go to Home Depot, when you go to a plant center, when they say something is organic, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is safe for you to use on your lawn. You just have to be very aware of this. The other part of this is the natural compounds, which they're technically derived or they're naturally produced. So aspirin is a natural compound. Okay. Arsenic is also a natural compound, as is asbestos. Snake venom is a natural compound. So think about these things in the context of what is the company trying to sell you? Ask them questions, try to read the labels and educate yourself, because it's very difficult, and their job is to sell you something based on what they think you want to hear. My last point on this is, if a lot of times I hear people saying, well, I put neem oil to rid myself of the pests. And it is a natural compound. It's derived from the neem tree. But it's safe for humans and pets. It really is. But it kills all insects. It doesn't only kill the insects that you're trying to target, it kills all of the insects. So my caution is buyer beware, be aware of what you're buying. Just be careful and ask the questions. Where does it derive its organic, natural, safe area from?
That's super helpful. Thank you. Okay, so I have a question for Neil, and I'm going to ask maybe Andrea to answer this.
Sure.
We shouldn't add compost to natives. Should we add some other kind of mulch to minimize weeds and retain soil moisture?
Well, you want to work with the soil you have. That's very important. We don't really want to change much of what is occurring there. And this is why you have to be really careful about the plants that you choose. You want to choose the plant that will work in that space, not change the space for the type of plant that you would like. So try to really do your research or ask a lot of questions about what type of plants you want to put into that place, and see which ones would be most suitable for it. See what the site conditions are, and work with what you have.
I'd like,
Soil testing as well is really important to determine what you're going to add.
And what would a newbie like I've never tested my soil, so how would I go about doing that?
You can get, I can answer that. You can get soil kits from like any of the land grant universities, soil testing kits, and they'll send you the kit, and they'll give you full instructions. You do get a very comprehensive report that might be a little bit too sciencey, but they also give you some basic info. But actually, I'm not a huge fan of soil testing myself. I prefer to see what is growing, and you can judge the soil from what is growing. Because I just think soil testing can sometimes get you too in the weeds, so to speak. Anyway, that's just my thought.
I like the thought that you said, see what other vegetation is growing around you.
Mhm.
Most of our soils here in the area are very acidic.
Yeah.
So you want to look for plants that prefer those. Every now and then we'll get a layer of calcification, and you'll see that by what plants are naturally occurring.
Mhm.
The ones that prefer a more, I guess, basic type of
Basic, yeah.
soil, you'll see those like all of a sudden, like, wow, look at these plants occurring here. This is a cue to tell me what's going on. But most importantly, whether, the moisture content and the light, take all of those cues into consideration and fit the plants to that spot and just really observe what else is growing there and what's doing well.
I'd also just like to add, think of plants can be a mulch. So you can plant ground covers that will be weed suppressive. So that's another avenue. There's many
Good point.
native species that act as wonderful ground covers that you can plant with other perennials and shrubs that will act as weed suppressors. Another consideration.
And leaves.
And leaves.
Yeah.
Yeah, leaves.
Well,
Of
so
course.
speaking of leaves and mulching, the next question is mulching leaves the same thing as leaving the leaves?
No, not really. Mulching leaves means chopping them up into small pieces, which we can usually do with a lawnmower. There are other mulching tools too, but basically we encourage people to mulch leaves that have fallen on turf grass and you just mow over them. Which is a great way of managing your fall leaves. One, it deals with them there and then, so there's no blowing required or removing them. But it also nourishes the soil and improves drainage. So it's really beneficial to lawns to mulch mow. Leaving the leaves is where they fall in a flower bed or around shrubs and under trees. That's where you want to leave the leaves. That one for the nutrients that they provide to those plants as they decompose, and also it's great habitat for a lot of our pollinators and amphibians and salamanders. They really need that leaf mulch to overwinter in. And then in turn, the birds come in. You'll see in the winter birds scratching around in leaf mulch, and they're looking for those things to eat through the winter. So leave the leaves where they fall if they're not on a lawn.
It's also a great insulator over the winter
Yeah,
for the tree and shrub roots.
yeah.
Okay, so Veronique is asking, what are your favorite replacements to common boxwoods that are up against my house and against a stone wall? They need to grow fairly tightly, no matter if evergreen or deciduous, any that are not native, but nonetheless not ecologically harmful.
Inkberry, which is our Ilex glabra, is our sort of replacement for boxwood many times. It's a very similar growth habit. You can hedge it, you can cut it if you want. Boxwood in itself is not a harmful plant. It's not native, but it's not doing any harm. It just doesn't add any value to our pollinators. Does anyone else have an opinion?
Um,
I like Leucothea.
mhm.
I think the common name is dog hobble.
Mhm.
It's it's evergreen, and it's very, very resilient. It took a friend's yard, it took all the snow piled up on it and bounced right back when the snow melted. So I think that's another good option.
And I just want to add too, there's a lot of different kinds of Ilex labor, different
Anyone else?
cultivars that can fit your needs. So some that are very small, some that are a little tighter, some that are a little looser. And again, just kind of look at your site conditions. Lakothaway like it a little shadier, boxwoods, I mean, inkberry likes the sun. So lots to consider.
Fiona, could you spell the plant that you said you broke up a little bit?
Yeah. Oh, um, someone help me.
OEO, yeah.
Leucothoe, I think.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
OEO.
Missy, how about can you answer this one? Rhonda is asking, what about retaining soil moisture?
Um, so again, I think plants do a really good job of retaining soil moisture. If you use them as your quote unquote green mulch, I think that's definitely a good way to go. And again, it all really depends on your site conditions and leaves. leaving your leaves in your garden beds also help retain soil moisture, in addition to other nutrients and other and habitat. But if anyone else would like to add anything, um, yeah, that,
Yeah, I think green
Mhm.
mulch is fantastic. It's once you've got it established, it's low maintenance,
One
really easy.
one of my favorites is Pacra. I find that a really great living mulch. Stays semi-evergreen. The deer don't really eat it. Has beautiful spring yellow flowers in May. Um, Provides a lot of food source for our insects. Requires very little care whatsoever. Sometimes I'll even combine that with wild strawberry as well. And they're two really great ground
Yeah.
covers that great, that inkberry, you put that in there and you put either one of those underneath, you've got a good start.
Pacra too, I just want to point out, is an excellent substitute for Pachysandra, for ivy, for vinca, sort of those traditional ground covers that are not providing any ecological value and actually can provide and actually do harm, especially in our woodlands if they escape.
Mhm.
Thank you. Okay, next question from Donna is, can you give plant examples for acid and basic?
So rhododendrons, azaleas, um, blueberries love acidic soils, mostly acidic soils. Most of our soils in our area are kind of neutral pH. And so everything else is sort of non-acidic, but you just have to, you have to do some research and give the soil its, adequate pH.
I think coaches let me know if I'm wrong about this, but sweet fern is a good example of one of our regional native plants that prefer calciferous soils or basic soils.
Yeah, that sounds right to me. Yeah.
Okay. Um, so next question is, any recommendation for when and how to remove invasive buckthorn and what native plants to replace it with?
Hmm.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Well, I mean, I do a lot of ecologically destructive plant removal. That's one that I have not come up much in this area as being a severe problem. So I'm interested to learn a little bit more about where you're tackling that. For the most part, the best management practices typically for most of the, especially the woody invasive species that we deal with, are cutting the shrub or the material as close to the ground as possible, perhaps leaving a ragged edge. This will help deter growth hormones from being released, and repeating that process as often as you can. But we say minimum 3 times a year. And a really good way of looking at that is before Memorial Day, once again around 4th of July, and after Labor Day. Just keep up and just make that plant continuously push out leaf material, not get any energy back down to its roots, and give all the resources, the light, the moisture, the nutrients in the soil to the plants you are trying, the native plants that you're trying to encourage, and just make it harder for those things like the buckthorn to grow.
Yeah, I mean the seedlings themselves, if you control the seedlings, you're halfway there. The big plants, I think Andrea is correct. In terms of replacement, something like a gray dogwood sort of grows in the same environment. It sort of
Mhm.
grows in that sort of mid-shady kind of area and is can be pretty aggressive. You know, just remember when you remove something, you do have to try to replace it with something. It does this. It's very little good to just remove something and leave it there. But I agree with Andrea. If you have mature plants and you cut them repeatedly, and again, the seedlings should be relatively easy to remove, and then over time, just replace them with something that's aggressive, like a gray dogwood, a nine bark, a chokeberry maybe. Those are the ones that I would suggest.
Depends on the site.
Yeah.
One thing we also recommend, I neglected to mention, was try to create as little disturbance as possible.
Mhm.
With many of these very aggressive, ecologically destructive plants, they thrive on disturbance. So what we want to do is avoid grubbing out the roots and really creating an area just potential for new dropped seeds in the soil bank to grow in beautifully prepared soil for them. So try to do as little disturbance as possible, especially if it's on a slope. And if you can, definitely replace with any native plant material. But then again, that's going to depend on the site, what your goals and priorities are, and what's available to plant.
Yeah, Neil, I remember your site very well. You did have a lot of buckthorn there.
Yeah.
Um,
He notes that it's near a lake. I don't know.
yeah,
Yeah. And
I mean
another,
it's just a wet. Oh, it is in a wet area.
if that's the case, one of my one shrub I really think everybody should have is smooth wither rod or Viburnum nudum. Um, this one I have found the deer tend not to browse. Of course, there's no guarantee with deer, but that's one of the reasons I really like to use it. It has beautiful fall color, beautiful berries, white flowers. It's really a workhorse in the garden. Adaptable, likes it moist, can take some shade, some sun, but can take sun. Um, but it does depend on your site. And I know we're sort of throwing out a lot of plant names here, so I don't want anyone to feel like if you have questions, please ask, or we can always do a follow-up.
And I'll add we're going to email everyone who's here tonight, everyone who registered, and you can write us, you can respond to that with any questions or refreshers. And we are going to post a video of this so you can watch it over and over again. Um, so here's another interesting question. Louise is asking for comments on tick control.
Mhm.
My understanding is, for example, invasives like Japanese barberry harbors them, but using the right plants will naturally keep them at bay. That is a very interesting question.
I can chime in a little bit on this. Again, Carolyn, maybe with the science background, you can also always do your tick checks. So one of the things that at Rooted Solutions we try to promote is balancing your ecosystem. And when we take one of the key elements out of the ecosystem, those checks and balances are now askew. And so what happens is the barberry harbors some of the animals that carry the ticks, and the predators that go after them, it's a little harder for them to get them in the barberry. So what we want to do is we just want to make the playing field level so that everything gets back in balance. And that's really what the message we're all trying to promote is getting that system back into balance. And once we have all those checks and balances taken care of, nature is really great at healing itself. So we want to encourage a healthy ecosystem. So we don't have one population out of control. So that's always going to be the goal. And that's why we're trying to remove some of or control some of these ecologically destructive plant materials, because it leads to all these kind of imbalances.
Yeah, I just attended the Native Plant Society of New Jersey's seminar, and they had Dr. Shepard. He's from Yale. He's a molecular and cell biologist, and he spoke exactly of ticks and tick-borne diseases and how prevalent they're getting, especially with climate change, with our area getting warmer, the ticks are sort of moving up. And there was actually an article in the New York Times about alpha-gal syndrome, which is a tick-borne disease. Um, ticks should be feared. They're a problem, but spraying them is not the solution. As you said, Andrea, it's and this was echoed by Dr. Shepherd, is removing barberry, removing their areas that their host, the
Habitat,
animals that
their
sort of
habitat.
carry them are going to be prevalent in, like the Japanese barberry, and then creating an environment where you have control, like natural control from other insects. We want insects in our property. It's so against what I think we kind of feel. We're like, ew, insects, but you need them. You need that balance, and you need that biodiversity in order to combat it. But it's a real problem. And at the end of the day, those of us who are in the field a lot, I spray my clothes with pyrethrin. Before I go out, it sort of washes, you can wash it through various cycles. And they were kind of laughing at me, but I have this little tick removal thing here that I got from my woodlot. And, you just have to do tick checks. It's really important. If you're out there, you just have to be aware. But there's no spray or, magic bullet to remove ticks from our area. They're here. We just
Um, um, a while ago, we had a talk up here in North Salem about the biotic corridors, and they were saying one of the reasons why we have the tick explosion that we have is because what has happened is we have swath of open lawn, no man's land between neighbor, swath of open land, no man's land between neighbors, and in those no man land patches of traditional woodland type of habitat, the species that harbor the most ticks thrive. Sparrows, turkeys, deer, the deer mice, that's like kind of their habitats. And the larger predators that go after those, they need a little bit larger area to be in, to do their hunting and to keep those populations in check. So what we can do by maybe diminishing some of our lawns and promoting more wild habitat to support these creatures, again, we can get those checks and balances back into the ecosystem. A lint roller works really well. Like, I'm in the field almost every day, lint roller in the car, check things. I wear an oversized white shirt, and it's the first thing I take off even before I get in the car, and I just wash it every time. So I've got a couple of them, just old oversized white shirts. Just be vigilant. It's just make it a habit, and check and do the best you can. But I think if we try to build a habitat or an ecosystem that helps support the things that eat the ticks or get that ecosystem back into balance, I think that will genuinely help.
Yeah, I just want to add too. I really agree with you, Andrea. Having tick treatments in our gardens gives people a full sense of security. They think, oh, well, I had my yard treated, so it's fine. It's not. It's fine for maybe a few hours, but that night, a few little mice will come into your yard, or a deer might walk across, and you've got ticks back in your yard. So, unless you have that rich biodiversity that encourages the tick predators, you're going to invite problems.
And I just want to add that it's non-selective tick spray. So that means it kills everything,
Right.
not just ticks. There's no such thing as a targeted tick spray.
No.
It just kills everything. So even some of those things that you want to have, well, most of the things that you want to have in your garden.
And then that balances out.
Exactly.
Just
So I don't, if anyone has any more questions in the webinar, please type them in. There's a question that people often call Bedford 2030 about, which is when somebody wants to take, a big piece of their grass and turn it into a garden or maybe even a meadow. What are some of the most effective ways to get started and to get rid of the grass and get it ready to plant a meadow?
I've done that. All four of us went to a symposium last year. And that exact question was raised, and they had all different speakers come in about the various different methodologies that they used and the successes and the failures. My particular favorite one that I use, that I have the most success with, is maintenance strategy. Your mowing regime, changing that up, and perhaps taking the sod layer or the top soil layer and just scratching that off. Do not add any soil amendments or fertilizers or topsoils or anything else. Just scrape the turf off. And what I'll do is I will create little islands within the lawn with sort of nurse plants, whatever plant material is best suited for that site. And then maybe in the fall, add a little bit of seed if there's a particular type of seed material that I have put in. But I found a lot of success with that. And then the mowing machine regime that goes along with it. One of the ones I've been successful with, and again, it might be different for depending on where you are, but I don't mow after a certain point in the summer. So we'll do a particular regular mowing regime, just like you would for your lawn, every week or every 2 weeks up until the end of June. And then you just let it go. And you don't mow it again until the spring, when the temperatures reach about 50 degrees and all the beneficial insects have emerged over the winter. And then you mow it all down and start that mowing regime all over again. And the reason is because you want those cool season grasses to finish growing and have the native warm season grasses take over. It's a process. It's not something that you're going to get done in just 1 year. That's one of the things about what we do is we are more on a 3, 5, 7 year projection as opposed to an annual projection, which is what we kind of all learned about gardening, these annual tasks that you have to do. Think of it more 3, 5, 7 years to get those things started, and start small and work your way out. So that's what I found works for me.
So Donna is asking, building on what you just said, can you just turn the sod over and leave it there?
I haven't done that. I don't necessarily know how that would work. It will probably take a little bit longer for that root system and that plant material to break down. So it might take a little bit longer of a process. I'm not there are other methodologies where solarization, or some did chemical treatments. I don't know, coaches, if there's any other ones that you want to chime in on, putting cardboard down, but those, I don't know, putting plastic in the environment, looking at cardboard for 6 to 9 months.
So Fiona and I did a project, and it's for small sites, for a small area. I think this works, is putting cardboard down and then putting mulch on top, or putting even wood chips on top just to kind of smother it and let it cook. That has worked. The St. Luke's in Katona, the little church there, we did that and that worked pretty well. The other thing that I have done on my property, especially around a tree, is just to stop mowing, and just the grass flops over. I just manage for invasives. It looks like flopped over grass. I guess eventually I should plant something in there, but it's a kind of a lazy way of doing that. And you build intentionality. You guys always talk about intentionality, and we discuss that a lot, by just mowing around it so that it doesn't look like I just forgot to mow that area. So those are all techniques, but you're right, Andrea, it's not a one and done.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not as easy as it sounds.
Mulching never is.
Meadow, but it's just not that easy.
Always a multi-pronged approach to any of the subjects we've talked about tonight are the best methods. And one of the things we've all learned is figure out what your goals are, where what you want to accomplish, and then you devise a plan of action on how to get there based on your budget and your priorities.
Mhm.
And Claire, who spoke earlier, who was coached earlier, she had a suggestion which I agree with is, it's okay to just start small and just expand from there. Don't try not to get overwhelmed with all of these changes. It's okay to just start with an area and say, okay, that worked. And it's all a process. It's all
Mhm.
an experiment. What works for you may not work for someone else.
That,
Really good point.
Yes, well said.
well, so I can't believe this has flown by. We have 3 minutes left. There's no more questions in the chat. If I don't know if one of you has a question you wish somebody asked, you could ask it. Although that would seem like the perfect wrap up. Oh, wait,
Yeah.
here we do. We have one more from Marina. If you have a smaller lawn area you want to plant natives, you can pile one. Oh, it's not a question, it's a comment. If you have a smaller lawn area you want to plant natives, you can pile 1 foot or so of leaves on the area and they will kill the grass over a winter.
Yeah, yeah, that'll work. It's the equivalent of smothering
Yeah.
the grass. It's just in some ways you risk a good wind kind of blowing it out of there, but yeah,
And
it's
again, a good example of, again, what might work for one, not for the other. That's great if you have a lot of oak trees and you do get a large
Mhm.
accumulation of leaves, but there are other places that don't really have that option. Maybe you have some maples or something that doesn't stay put as well as like an oak leaf does, and you have to resort to different tactics. But yeah, if you have the leaves, I personally don't like trucking different things around. So use what you have on your site. Try not to bring in leaves and things from other places because then we're just kind of spreading sometimes some of the ecologically destructive seed bank or material around.
Um, well, so I just want to thank our audience for being here. Thank you to our coaches for all sharing your knowledge. And Claire, thank you for sharing your experience. And I want to say that we will send you information about if you want to have a free session with one of the coaches, how to sign up. And as Missy mentioned, Bedford 2030 is hosting an Earth Day festival on Sunday, April 26th at Bedford Village Park. The coaches are going to be there. There'll be Bedford Farms is selling native plants, and there's just all kinds of garden land, wonderful expert exhibitors. So we invite you to join us for that. And let's keep this conversation going.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Midge.
thank
Thank
you,
Thank
you. Thank you.
you.
Thanks,
Bye,
everybody.
everybody.
everybody.